Does Rome need an emperor to survive? Does Rome need that senate to survive? It had both for so long, and yet life has ebbed away from this city, this empire. I think we can all agree that the only thing Rome needs is Romans. And how funny that Romans, who our greatest ancestors would praise, are the rarest among the rare among the stands of the Colosseum, and rarer still in the halls of this godless palace. So hear this and hear it well. As the protector of Rome, I will now enact emergency measures for the protection of the city. From this day henceforth, the Roman citizenship of every resident or visitor is void. To be a Roman is not a birthright, not a privilege that can be bought, but a status passed out by the gods and the greatest of men to those with the virtues to honour the title, to make it clear that to be Roman is to be without rival, without fear, and without error. And all of you palace dogs are included, of course. Exceptions shall be made only for myself and my family, and for my troops. We have proven ourselves many times over already, as I'm sure you'll concur. And any who join my legion will also share in its glory by receiving automatic citizenship. For the rest, tests of character will be prepared. For those that fail to be Roman, the rights of a Roman man will not be applied, and their property will be forfeit to the Temple Council to use as we see fit. No, and that reminds me. For today only, citizenship comes free to anyone who brings me a brick from a Christian church. Hello and welcome back to Fields of Mars. Last time, after finishing the conquest of the islands of the Mediterranean, we had to put down a Celtic rebellion of all things, and that proved very easy thanks to their poor decision making. Then Constans quickly headed off with Aurelianus to capture Neapolis on the Italian peninsula, with the real goal being to move on Rome. But first we had a surprise attack from Hispania hitting Palma over to the west, and the defenders managed to get a somewhat contrived defeat in the end, but nothing we can't resolve. And as Tullus went to go and deal with that, Constans went to attack Rome, as it were, to save it from the Visigoths by getting rid of his incompetent defenders. So we're right after that battle to take Rome, the successful battle, where our loss is surprisingly high when you look at what the enemy actually had defending the city, and that's mainly just because of the towers, who do a lot of damage to those legionaries, slow-moving, easy-to-hit targets. So we will be occupying the city now, and we'll have to get to work right away on making it defendable, because there are still enemies around the place to deal with. So we'll repair up all the damage the city seems to have done to it, probably both by us and the Visigoths at this point. The walls aren't in good condition, so if it gets attacked, there'll probably be breaches, meaning the enemy won't have to siege, so the place could be assaulted, so we need to leave the troops in the city for now to deal with that, and we need to get rid of that pesky church as well. Now, I got peace with the Abdanians. The Abdanian thing is a weird back and forth where they keep declaring war on me and not doing anything about it, and then eventually asking for peace. And every time they do, I just ask for some money off them. So it's going quite well having them out there in the sea. My old enemy, definitely a shadow of its former self. So now in the next turn, we've got rebellions coming up on the islands, and we've also got a rebellion here near Rome. As you might expect, some Romans aren't too happy about the fact we've moved in and started dictating things, so they're going to be forming a rebel army, and we're going to allow that army to form up in order to defeat it later and gain a big public order bonus. I was also just looking around the Italian peninsula to assess what's going on, and there are barbarians to the north who've occupied a strip there, cutting off the rest of the Roman Empire from us, and that's almost nice, because it means the Western Romans can't really counterattack their own capital. We can also see Huns for the first time on the end of the Italian peninsula, so they've managed to get this far west. Makes me wonder what the situation over in the eastern part of the map's actually like to see them this far west, so hopefully we'll go and have a look at some point. Tullus has arrived near Palma, ready to make his attack, which will have to come in the next turn, but we notice the Hispanian army isn't there, so we might be able to take it very easily as a result of that. Meanwhile, Constans is just going to try and clear some space around Rome. I attacked the large Visigothic army to the north and it just ran away. That army's in bad condition. There's a second army down to the south here, so I thought I'd just do the same thing, just get them out of the way. But curiously, this army actually decides it does want to fight, which, as you can see from the balance bar here, is a terrible decision. We do have even our garrison army from Rome coming in, barely anything in it. We do have a governor helping out as well. So we'll just have to wipe out this army. I'm not really sure why it's even bothering with this battle, especially since the large army ran away. Maybe it somehow managed to run out of movement points. So easy victory for Constans, feeding him some experience. And for the Visigoths, probably a big loss, since they are a horde faction. They don't have much ability to create new armies and restore their troops after the loss of the horde, so that's actually a massive blow for them to just stand there and get killed like that. We are going to leave those rebels, as I said, so we'll just let them continue with their thing, but I wanted to move back north and attack that other Visigothic army, because it turned out I did have the movement points to be jumping around like this thanks to free movement through Rome, and again the balance bar super far in our favour, even more far in our favour than before, because even though this army is bigger, it has a terrible composition, as well as having some damaged units. You can see it's just loads of archers and hurlers for the most part, which will be particularly bad against legionaries, since they could just form up in a huge set of mobile testudos and advance on the enemy for pretty much no losses at all. So anyway, that I guess is what happens, because Constans just crushes that army and now has to move back. Has been very carelessly trespassing against our northern neighbours there, so hopefully they won't get too angry about that. Now, one interesting thing that happened in the end turn sequence is Macedonia, who I'm at war with thanks to the Visigoth pulling them in, actually have a fleet appearing, so that might be coming to attack one of my islands. We need to keep an eye on it. We also see lots of Western Roman Empire armies hanging around in Iberia. It seems they've really fortified that location, but they're not coming after us, they seem to just be defending it. The rebel army has grown, and grown in an interesting composition. It's now siege and cav, a composition which is particularly weak against pretty much everything, so we'll see if they put in any regular units later on. And that Hun army has moved up near Neapolis. They're not at war with us, so they won't attack us right away, or at least they probably won't. They may just be moving through right now. I almost missed this, but there's actually a rebellion there on the island. The drunken warriors, again, pulling lots of siege into their army, and that could become an issue if it builds up a lot and comes to attack the city, because we don't have anything on the islands to stop them. But right now they're raiding instead of recruiting, so it seems the rebellions on those islands are particularly unfavourable in terms of getting actual troops, so well, that's good for us. Now Tullus moves on Palma at last, and the Hispanian army actually did come back from wherever it was. It's still not fully replenished, but it is enough to give us a balanced engagement for this town assault. They'll have their garrison as well, so they'll have numbers, but we have Tullus's super high level skills and of course the legionaries to fall back on. To the Imperial Master of Officers, Gratianus Tullus, it has no doubt slipped your mind that your mandate as the secondary commander of the expedition was to keep the whims of the primary commander in check. The Senate is most concerned with reports from Rome that said commander is establishing himself as master of the city with no word of your presence or influence. Rome may be used to tyrants, but it is the desire of this Senate, and even of Consul Constantinus, that the wishes of the Roman people be respected. It is understood that the expedition can no longer be recalled, and some of us believe that you have done great deeds. But now we all look to you to ensure that Constans can be controlled, and that if he can't, that he takes our foes down with him. So Tullus forms up to attack the city, forming up to attack from just one direction this time. First we want to take out their defences, and then we'll decide whether we want to split the army up and attack the town from multiple sides. So the Onager is going to get to work. We just need to take out these towers. The accuracy of the Onager is going to be the main problem, but it only takes 2 hits from a flaming shot to bring one down, so slowly we should be able to get the hits we need to take out a couple of towers, perhaps even all of them if we're extremely lucky. The enemy seem to be trying to disrupt this though. They send out a few units to engage our stationary army, those archers shooting at my cav, and the enemy's cav charge out to engage with my mercenary Germanic cav, so we'll take that engagement because I believe my units are a little bit better than their scout equites, and we can just move a second unit to go and surround them and make sure the enemy definitely lose that little fight. The disruption attempts do not prevent the Oranges from getting one of the towers down here. A few shots landing on it very nicely, and you can see they've been missing sufficiently to set the buildings nearby on fire as well, which might debuff the enemy if we destroy enough of the settlement this way, although we will have to repair it because this is going to be our settlement very soon. So I disengaged from that cavalry fight due to the arrival of some spearmen to support it. So this fight is taking place almost entirely on our right flank, which is a bit annoying because our infantry aren't really in a position to counter it. But we do have here on the right our heavy skirmishers, who are now going to play some games with the enemy's comitatensis spears, who are too slow to catch them. Onagers now actually in trouble though, because the disruption is being turned up by these fire arrows. The enemy have already destroyed one onager, there goes a second one, so they've already halved our offensive capability at long range there. In response to this, I'm going to move the army forwards to form up in front of the onagers to see if we can draw fire, and if not, move out to engage them, especially because now that that tower is down, we actually have most of the front of the town free of threat from tower fire. Meanwhile, the skirmishers are having a great time taking out these comitatensis spears. You can see one unit basically delays them with a quick melee, and the other unit just destroys it with flanking attacks from javelins. One unit already routed, this unit losing most of its men, probably going to rout soon as well. But the enemy now are bringing out more and more forces. They're just kind of escalating this skirmish, and my main force is just standing here. The enemy cavalry charge the front of it, which will do absolutely nothing, so we'll just let the legionaries reform themselves and then fight that melee. They also brought some cavalry around to my left flank to make an attack here, and on this flank I had stationed these mercenary pikemen, who should do okay against the cav, but their formation was completely abysmal. They eventually got something together and managed to start damaging that cav unit. Tullus went over to help as well. He's in a testudo because some of the enemy have javelins and are killing some of his guards there, but he should be fine. So the main fight is actually taking place just with this one unit of legionaries. So the enemy bunched up towards our right flank and all charged into this one unit, which is now resisting them quite well, but is taking damage slowly but surely thanks to there being so many units engaging it. Of course though, we can simply fold the centre around, both to make javelin attacks and then melee attacks on that blob of enemy troops. But since the enemy are just kind of drip feeding out like this, we can't completely surround them, because these extra units still coming out of the town will then surround us if we do that. So we have to be careful to try and lock down the units before they rear attack the units that I'm using to make rear attacks. And you can see I'm trying to do this here, pressing on three sides into this blob of enemy troops, which is now suffering a big rout and will suffer big losses from those attacks. But by doing so, I am opening up these gaps that the enemy can run through, and this unit of archers is in trouble and now has to scarper as the enemy charge through this huge gaping hole in the line, which will now need to start redirecting forces to try and defend. We need to very quickly wipe out these enemies here and then fold out the line to get something a lot neater going on. It's getting messier and messier. Luckily our troops are so good though that even in these open chaotic melees they're still going to be damaging the enemy quite a lot. The onagers managing to pick off one unit from the enemy's general's bodyguard as he moves up, with the last of the forces in the town now coming out to join the fight with really no particular strategy by the looks of it. They're just running out and attacking the nearest guys they see. Here a unit of the German cav, which was chasing some archers, got into trouble because the archers led them back into a blob of spearmen and they were defeated. This unit of legionaries kind of looks like it's in trouble, but it's not really. It's being attacked on three sides by 3 units of enemy infantry, but it's just defeating them in the melee. They are going to take some losses, of course, but that's going to be fine, and we will have time to save them soon with another unit. Tullus fighting himself against some enemy infantry who came in to engage on our left flank, and some cavalry supporting him should mean he'll be able to defeat that unit soon, even the pikes going in to help out as well. The centre kind of getting a little bit less messy now. That's the main objective, is to form a proper battle line, and we've got 3 units of legionaries attempting to do that, so we can just queue up all of the enemy's units to fight, especially with our archers now providing support. That's a really good idea to make them just blob up, because it'll rain arrows on all the troops while they're not doing anything. So here that continues, and the cavalry can come in to attack the rear of the blobs that are now forming, which is very nice. The enemy's morale not low enough to break from just a cavalry attack, but cycle charges will do damage. Out on the right flank, those skirmishers still having a great time just leading enemy units around the place, and the archers getting involved in this part of the fight as well to cut down enemies with their back turned like these Legio. Very nice indeed. They also landed some marines out there, so I had 1 unit of legionaries out on the flank getting rid of those marines, and now they're coming back in to engage with this random unit of enemy legionaries, which has come to find them, I guess. So there's no other reason to be wandering about out at this portion of the battlefield. Unfortunately, our Legio will beat their Legio, and very quickly they rout and will be overrun by our forces. As you can see from the balance bar, this is pretty much over now. The enemy giving up on trying to break through our now reformed front line. Their general still going to have a go though, fighting right at the front and taking huge losses. The Palatinate guards far inferior to legionaries, and he is going to rout as well, sending in his Comitatensis spears to cover his retreat, but they're not going to last long, and even as he goes, our archers start bombarding him with heavy arrows which will pierce through his armour. So as one more cavalry attack comes in on the left flank there to finish off the unit, it's basically over. The entire enemy army starts running away, and we've won this battle without actually having to attack the town. So that was quite nice. A surprise field battle, which the enemy played as poorly as possible by just sending in units a bit at a time, guaranteeing it would be destroyed a bit at a time by our forces. So Palma is taken back. I had an idea and immediately cursed myself for having it this year and not in the last. It was arisen by an insistence from the Senate in Londinium. I mention the location only to clarify that I do not mean the Roman Senate, recently stripped of their property and forced into the field with an army in tow. The Senate of Britannia was disappointed that Constans was turning out to be made entirely from the much hated but not unbearable crazy streak of his father. I had thought of asking said father to replace Constans with Julianus, a far more sensible choice for a defensive war. I had thought to train him myself, but now replacing Constans means beating him in a fight. He will not drop his sword even for our consul. He has no consul, it is more accurate to say. So a nice victory for Tullus. We'll have a look at the battle results. He took losses relatively evenly across many of his units, a couple of units coming away unscathed, and some of those mercenary cav there taking a lot of damage. Overall, pretty good considering we completely destroyed the enemy in that siege assault, and we will reoccupy Palma as a result. We'll have to get back to repairing it so it's ready to go once again, especially the legionary barracks, so that we can continue adding to Tullus's army. Now, I also noticed that Rome, despite being one of the main cities in the world, there's only a level 1 settlement, so I think it's about time that Rome was made at least partially great again by upgrading it to a level 2. We can definitely afford to do it, and we also need to wait for the walls to be repaired as well, so it's more defensible. Now, in the end-turn sequence, we see the Gaetulians going on the offensive against the Western Roman Empire right outside our door, and they seem to fail in that regard, so at least they're keeping each other busy, means we can just continue to ignore them as I have done so far. The Morians stepping in there as well from Western Africa and actually moving those Western Romans away, perhaps opening up an avenue for attack, and the Macedonians continue on their way towards us, although it doesn't look like they're going for Caralis, so at least they're not landing there, but they may be coming towards Palma right now. Now we see the Romans counterattack during their turn and actually push away the invading African fleets, but we see just how much stuff the Western Roman Empire actually has. There are just full stacks all over the place, and I'm sure some of them are actually navies as well, just to make things a little bit harder for us if we wanted to try and get over there. Interesting though, we need to pay very close attention to all of those fleets, because they of course could just come and take those islands back with ease. Now everyone's offices have expired, so we need to go back in and assign all of the official state positions, and of course Constantinus, who is in charge of doing this, will simply give his sons all of the superior billing here. I could order some of the governors and such into a couple of other positions, so that's not so important. I wanted to give Theodosius a rank, but he has absolutely no influence, so he's not able to get himself into a rank. He's just too unknown. So it's been a long time since Theodosius did anything, I guess. He's just garrisoned up at Camaldinum, so that's the end of his political career, perhaps. Now Tullus is going to start heading over towards Caralis, because I want to have our garrison on the islands be in the main settlement. Especially because if there's a rebellion, that's where it's going to be. So we probably are going to need to face rebels soon, considering the public order, so we need to get Tullus back soon. The rebels that were there previously are just sitting around in the sea at the moment, not really sure what they're planning to do, but they're so weak that it almost doesn't really matter, so we'll just continue ignoring them. And speaking of rebels, the rebel army in Italia is almost up to full strength, one turn away at this point, and the Huns have also made a return, standing right outside Rome, which is highly suspicious. I thought I'll go see what the Huns think of me in order to determine what they're doing, but then when I was here I realised I haven't actually done diplomacy in ages, so I might as well start making some deals. So the first deal we got was a peace deal with Hispania, in which I got them to give me some money, basically. So that's nice, a slightly reduced concern level for the islands and some free money. I also got trade with the Garamantians, who seem to control the central coast of northern Africa there, so that's very nice. They have a lot of territory by the looks of things. It seems Africa has been almost entirely taken over by the African kingdoms, which I guess makes sense. The Geats refusing trade closer to home, who have moved from their traditional home to take over the Franks and Saxon lands, I believe. And then there was the Eastern Roman Empire, who were willing to trade, which is the first time we've had any relations with the Eastern Roman Empire. And I realise it's probably because they're about to be destroyed. Their strength ranking is really low, and their capital is on an island, which usually means they've lost all of their main territory on the mainland. So we managed to get a trade deal and a non-aggression pact with them, and I realised that before the Roman Empire disappears out there, what we should do is finally get a wife for Julianus. So I'm basically going to buy a member of their family to marry into ours by marrying Julianus, and this will make Julianus and the family as a whole actually connected into the imperial family of the Roman Empire, which means now we can pull some very interesting tricks of actually allowing ourselves to be the legitimate heir to the empire should the Eastern Roman Empire itself fall. So now we'll definitely need to keep that in mind. I wanted to see what I could see through the new trade routes that I've just opened up. The Garamantians, nothing particularly interesting going on down there, and the Eastern Roman Empire appear to be possibly about to be attacked by a fleet sitting outside the city, and their garrison's only at half strength, and I think that's actually because they have no food, as we can see there. I'm not sure if the AI actually suffers from food penalties, but normally that would reduce your garrison. I think the AI on the higher difficulties might not actually have that, or has it to a much reduced extent. But anyway, so that was some pretty good diplomacy, and in the end I actually forgot to look at the Huns' relationship to me, and it's okay, not too hostile, so I'm sure they're not going to attack me immediately. I trust that sending the messenger to the Imperial Palace of Rome will make sure you get this. You know, everyone wonders what you're up to, and that's putting it mildly. And that you insist on dragging poor Aurelianus around with you only makes us more concerned. Time for a family reunion, isn't it? Well, anyway, I'll save you the scorning. That's what father is for, after all. I just wanted to share some good news with you. I am to be married. How is your wife, by the way? She probably doesn't understand a mote of what's happening out there. But my own betrothed is rather familiar with all that high politics. I don't know if you're aware of the whole network of imperial lineage, but my new wife, well, she's in it, and thus so am I. Isn't that neat? At the start of the next turn, we learn a rebellion is imminent on the island, so Tullus needs to keep an eye out for that. We also learn that Constans has been blocked in his attempt to take his office, which I think was Supreme Commander, and we can either have him force his way into it, or Constantinus can just decree that he must take it and no one can object, and that is exactly what he's going to do right now. The rest of the officers are not opposed. So Tullus can successfully complete his journey to Carolus with a Visigothic navy actually hanging around outside there, luckily not in any position to block him actually going into the docks, and going ashore where he can now continue the recruitment of legionaries in his attempt to create a fully functional army for himself. And we do need Palma to stay alive for that, and we'll see in a moment why that's important. Now the rebel army near Rome has finished building itself up, so it's time to attack it with Constans, and as we go in it just runs away, indicating that it is trash in its composition, at least compared to Constans. Now Constans is probably thinking that he might want to leave Rome right now anyway, because we've recently learned that the Eastern Roman Empire is in trouble, and just like how he saved Rome, perhaps he can go and save the Eastern Roman Empire, or save Constantinople, and gain equal glory and equal rights to power over the remnants of the empire. And the first step in that direction will be to go right through this rebel army. As we get close, we see it is indeed absolutely nothing in comparison to his own force, and he even gets the garrison from Neapolis to add to his power. Their composition was a bit strange. Lots of siege, shock cavalry, missile cav, and missile infantry, just a few regular infantry units in there. I considered fighting it just because it was such an interesting composition, but decided it would actually probably be quite annoying to fight, and we'll just go look for something more interesting to do, a more balanced engagement perhaps. So we'll wipe them off the map, take the replenishment, and now Constans needs to find a way to get himself back onto the ocean, and there are beaches down by Tarentum. But to get to those, we'll have to defeat the garrison of Tarentum first. Luckily, it's just a couple of units, nothing special. We need a ram to get in those, so we have to wait a turn before we actually do that. And then it'll be another turn to get him out to sea. So a slow process, but he can escape Attila in that direction. Now the Huns actually follow Constans down towards Tarentum, setting up right behind him there, so we'll just need to watch those guys and make sure they don't get up to any shenanigans while we're trying to finish this siege. The Angles randomly declare war on us, and we'll just have to make sure we keep an eye on Britannia because of that. They could come over with a stack to invade it, and we have basically nothing there to defend against it. And on the topic of nothing to defend against it, the Macedonians come to attack Palma all of a sudden, and this was pretty annoying considering we just lost and retook Palma, and now they're coming in with a massive advantage. We've got a few marines, so I thought what we might be able to do is the classic trick where we kill the general before he lands. I had low hopes though. The first set of marines actually just routed immediately because they were taken out by some darts from some legio, but the second group of marines did manage to get onto the enemy commander's boat, and the enemy commander himself was standing right there in front of them. He's standing stock still, hoping they don't see him if he stands still enough. This plan though eventually wears off, and our men realise he's standing right there and enter combat. So since he's right up the front, there's a chance we'll actually kill him. And sometime later, while I was microing back in the city to defend against an early cavalry attack, it turned out our men did manage to kill that general, which I did not expect at all. And as we've seen before, that completely changes how this battle will go now, because the enemy will now rout very easily. Basically anything will cause them to rout, so we can get rid of units on the land. Unfortunately, the marines that actually achieved this rather important stage of the battle were routed themselves. They couldn't finish off the unit, which itself did not rout, which is curious. Usually the bodyguards rout when the general dies, especially when they also have seasickness. But anyway, so there's going to be a land battle now. We've got our legio using their darts to cut down the enemy's comitatensis spears as they advance into battle. And the plan will be the usual one, to let the enemy all bunch up together coming in to attack the choke points, and then we've got a few scout equidanes to do rear attacks with, and possibly even spare some infantry to do it as well. So it's already been done here on the southern approach. We kill a few guys and then we just get out of the way so that those units on the right there can come in and engage as well, and then we can bring the cavalry back and basically just do exactly the same thing. See it happening there, the enemy's general's bodyguards, last surviving members of the general's bodyguard, fighting for only a few seconds before routing, and that's going to spook the legio nearby, who rout with basically full troops. Lovely, we'll wipe those guys out and then can focus on the enemy's main attack, which is coming from the west, and they have already defeated one of our units. We do need to keep in mind that this plan doesn't work if the enemy actually win those melees. You just have to hope the melees last long enough for you to be able to do all the stuff you need to do to rout the enemy. But we've got some men now freed up on that southern approach to come and join in the fight as well, so it should keep going for a while. We'll do some cycle charges with the scout equites. The enemy are breaking through, you can see at the front there, down to actually just a couple of units, quite a while later here in the battle. And the enemy does have the melee advantage. They definitely have enough units to easily defeat all of our guys in melee. It's just morale we're relying on. If we hadn't killed that general, this certainly would have been a defeat in this battle. No cheeky wins available here unless the general had committed suicide at some point. So later on we're just grinding against the enemy, attacking from all sides. The enemy definitely have the advantage, but they're starting to rout one unit by one because they just don't want to continue the fight, even though we've only got like 50 guys and they're all weaker than the enemies, and the charge of those archers at the last second suddenly spooks the enemy. They're not going to stay around to see what happens when the archers get into melee. And their attempts to leave are, of course, completely negated by the fact we have them surrounded, so they really should have just fought to the death here. They are going to be slaughtered in their attempts to get out of this encirclement, and they probably would have won if they tried to fight to the death and just killed all of our guys. So that's the end of that. Our men let up a cheer. It's another very cheeky naval assault victory for a town which actually has the exact same town model as Saguntium, so they really pulled the Saguntium here. A Pyrrhic victory, and we also get an achievement, Veteran Admiral, which is for winning 25 naval battles. Thanks, game. The city of Rome began to flourish. Without an empire drawing away funds, long-needed regeneration could go ahead. Walls were reinforced, waterways were repaired, and the theatres, libraries and forums were restored to their former glory. The protector of Rome gave the people many reasons to be thankful of his arrival, but by the time he had gained such praise, he was gone. Constans had read the same texts as his father, the accounts of the lives of Roman leaders of the early empire and previous republic, and he had learned that those with the most fame and the most respect were not those who governed, even with the most wisdom and skill possible. It was those who won battles that found a place in the hearts of Romans. So thanks so much for watching. Constance's new mission will have to take an unexpected detour, but he will receive some very good news at the same time in the next episode of Fields of Mars.